just to the previous story, which is a delightful story. So many of you knew it in Sunday school. The previous story is that Jesus is sitting in a boat, talking to the multitude, and after he has done preaching to the people who gathered along the shore, he'd been in Peter's boat, just a little way off. That way people couldn't stand around him and block the view and everything. He said to Peter, now let's push out in the deeper water. You can put down your nets and we'll get a nice catch of fish. And Peter says, we were fishing and there's no fish out there today. But nevertheless, they go out and they put down the nets and so they throw the nets in the water and apparently it's like, and this fish upon fish until the boats were nearly swamped. It was a miraculous catch of fish. And Peter says something to Jesus at that point. Remember what the leper just said. He said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. So in the story, right before the leper story, the Peter story, the miraculous catch of fish, Peter says, it's kind of funny when the page turns and I turn it. I had a moment of it. Am I wrong? Does it not say that? Peter says, go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. Do you notice that the two statements are mirrors of each other? It's that Peter is saying, stay away, stay away. And the leper is saying, please, come near me. Help me. Peter encounters the Lord Jesus, falls on his knees, and says, go away. I'm a sinful man. And the leper comes, falls on his knees before Jesus, and has his hand up like this, saying, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Now the story about Peter, where he says, he falls on his knees before Jesus, and he says, Lord, you need to stay away from me. I am a sinful man. And you can imagine all that would go into that. Lord, you do not know that there are people who are waiting for the judgment day so they can stand up and they can accuse me of this and that. There are things that have been going on. Another impure thought. And there's things that I've done, and there's people I've cheated, or there's ways I've behaved, or words that just spilled out of my mouth. Lord, you need to stay away. You don't want to associate with me, would be Peter's statement. And Jesus simply says, do not be afraid. And now you will catch men. So follow me and you will be fishers of men. Do not be afraid. And from now on, you will catch men. And so I like Jesus' response to that. Don't worry about it. And Peter's saying, really? And this? And I did that? Even the sense of inadequacy, because Peter had been hanging around with Jesus in the time previous, so who knows what sins he committed after he had also been near Jesus. Jesus healed his mother-in-law. Jesus had already been preaching and teaching and doing things, and Peter's saying, I have such sin. And so Jesus just says, don't worry about it. Don't be afraid. And calls him to follow him. Now, that's a beautiful, it's so beautiful for Jesus to say, do not be afraid. Don't even be afraid of your own sin. Once you come in connection with Christ, don't be afraid of that. But it just does raise a question. If you realize that's not a real good conclusion to the story of Peter and Jesus, where Peter makes a protest once Jesus has really been revealed to him through this miraculous catch of fish, that Jesus has really been presented to Peter in a certain fullness where he knows what is going on in Jesus Christ. Some of this has been revealed to him, and he responds that, I'm not worthy to be here. In fact, Lord, you don't want to be near me because of my sin. And Jesus says, don't be afraid. But we would say, well, what about his sin? What about his sin? Don't tell me it doesn't matter. I know when I sit and have a good think about my sin, I know that it matters. If you were one of Peter's neighbors, or in Peter's family, or Peter's business partners, whoever his sins had gone rampaging through the town, and whoever his sins had affected, they might say his sins matter. Who is this Jesus who just says, do not be afraid? Does he not care? Does he just have a high tolerance for people? We're left with kind of questions in our minds and saying, well, that I heard what Jesus just said. Do not be afraid. From now on, you will catch men. And we see Peter following after Jesus. But we're still wondering, well, what about his sins? So the next story then of the man with leprosy who approaches Jesus is kind of an answer to that. Because the man with leprosy also has some significant problems if you begin to think about it. That he's coming up saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. But the leper also, the man with this horrible skin disease, his family relationships are broken. He's not been with any of his people for so long. You were supposed to stay away from good company. You were supposed to stay away from the proper villages and live out. You were supposed to warn people to stay away from you. You're in abject poverty. There weren't good jobs for people who had terrible skin diseases. And if you think that your family wouldn't resent you coming down with a disease and being separate from them because of the cause of that, they wouldn't be so unreasonable as to hold bitterness or just express themselves in anger or perhaps act out because I caught a disease and I had to be separated and quarantined. Oh yeah, they would. You would find that human nature is just that even though it's not something your fault, even if we say those words, well, it seems that that's a disease that he has. Oh, there's still bitterness. There's still resentment. There could be very hard words. There could be grasping and cheating. And also, he has a terrible skin disease. It could be revealed in his face. He could have lost, fingers and whole limbs. There would be a smell. This man comes up with what you would call intractable problems that there is not any easy human solution for, problems that raise many issues, problems that people might even say, what did he get into that he ended up with that disease? Problems that touch upon his past, that have put a blight upon his future, that have set him in the neediest position he could possibly be in. Making that statement then, he says, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. We see who Jesus is. Because he's the one who can say, it is my will, and you are clean. It's not that these are not issues of importance, whether they're betrayals, or troubles, or failures, or diseases, bad choices, sins in our past. Whether there's God deeply cares about the calamities and some of the havoc that has been caused by people acting out and getting into the wrong things in a family or a community situation. But Jesus is the one who can enter that situation and says, do not be afraid, and follows it up with displaying the power to heal it and to make it right. Yeah. So now we have a picture of who he is. This man, it's not that he doesn't care about sin, which is Peter's problem, and it's not that he might not be as human in an eye and just pain to see human suffering. That also affects him deeply. But he's the one who has the life of the Father so expressed in his life that at a word, at his command, these problems can be solved. And if we would say, well, but what about? Or, Lord, did you consider, and Lord, that's a really terrible, do not be afraid, it's my will, you're clean. Now the next screen talks about how. Because we're following this here, that there was a lovely contrast set up where Peter felt that, oh, my problems, Lord, you do not want to associate with my problems. And we had direct contrast. The leper said, well, reflected that when people saw this by the shores of the lake, they just jumped back. Okay, and when people heard this story, and, listening to the church tell the story in the original language, they said, "Oh, okay, tell you why it is that there was a word for touch, just to touch." And you mind if I touch you? Okay, good. Okay, there's a word for touch. Okay, that's a touch. Now, can I shake your hand? Okay, there was touch. This, and then there was grasp. The word in the scripture is grasp. Okay. Now, my friends, I have been in a lot of hospital situations and encountered a lot of illness. Okay, because I've been doing this 22, 23 years, and there are a few medical conditions. I won't tell you what they are in case you someday come down with one of them. There are a few medical conditions that still give me the willies, okay? I mean, are you with me on this, okay? That there's, that kind of thing. Now, so we won't say what those are because, trust me, if you have something of that nature and we encounter each other in a hospital setting, I will be the professional, okay? You won't know. I'll go out to the car and go, right? There is just such a thing as an awful factor, I tell people sometimes that do you want to be a saint? That Mother Teresa was easily regarded as the holiest person that lived, in the last century, and she's widely regarded as a saint, as a person of great sanctity and devotion to God. How did she do that? Well, it wasn't because she was such a great advocate for the poor. It wasn't that she was good at raising money. It wasn't that she organized ways of helping lots of people. But her fame, her beginnings, her primary work was among dying people in the streets of Calcutta, India. And that her and the other Sisters of Mercy would go out into the streets and they would find somebody who was actively dying, passing away. They had hours or days. Their body was already long gone. Things would be bloated. There would be oozing. And they would be laying in the mud. They would be nothing but need and pain and stench. And then her and the other sisters would hoist these people up onto a stretcher. And sometimes they were bad enough you left bits of them in the gutter. Okay, just put them on a stretcher and take them into the hospice. Bathe them. Put good sheets over them. And sit next to them and bring them every comfort they could while they passed away. Which kind of, if you bring that to young people and say, you want to be a powerful saint in your life, well, there's the first and easy path right there. That you wouldn't mind the smell. You wouldn't get impatient with vast human need. That you would be able to hear in your own ears the groaning and not not lose your mind, that you would, the odor, all of this, you would use your hands and touch them. Jesus can heal with a touch. And I made sure and got a picture that showed him holding the man's arm. Because actually most churchy pictures of the scene that Jesus is doing one of these. It's just a real light thing. And it's to show him as kind of a reverent and holy individual. But remember, the man with the skin disease comes and he's oozing and there's a smell and there's abject poverty and need, and he's even cut off from the temple and the holy places in Jerusalem. If you had anything running out of your body, you were not to be in the holy place. And you know what you and I would do. Okay, you need healed. Right? Healed with Coke. In fact, Jesus could heal at a distance, right? There's stories about that, where he didn't even travel to the house. He said, your daughter is healed. Your servant is healed. do this at a distance. You're good. But Jesus doesn't say, we'll do this at a distance. He doesn't say, could you wash and then we'll do this? He reaches out his hand and he grabs that man's arm. That would make the people watching the thing go. He reaches out his hand, and when you tell that story in the first century, and it says, and there was a man and a leper, and he said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus, they knew what a guy with a bad skin disease looked like. There was bacteria back then that like you wouldn't believe. And they said, and then Jesus went out, reached out, and clutched this man. And if you were listening to that story, especially if you were a young boy, you'd say, he did, really? He did that? Yeah, he did that. We learn a couple things about Christ in this story. Now, first off, he's the one that is ready to deal with our problem. And if you don't think people can feel the way Peter did, Lord, do not. Their sin. I can testify that people have told me that. That I remember good many years back. I was had gone into kind of a pastoral relationship with somebody, and it was developing into a situation of friendship where we could sit at one another's houses, hang, do some of the same things, have deep conversations, and I was stopped abruptly when somebody said, Pastor, I have to warn you about me. Well, that's a sentence you don't hear every day, right? I have to warn you about me. And that individual wanted to mention that there were, in their past, there had been 911 calls, there had been betrayals, there had been appallingly bad behavior, there had been choices that nobody should ever have made, and there's just an ongoing, aspects of their life that were marked by irresponsibility and the inability really to gain any kind of reputation back. And you can channel, when you answer God's call in your heart, you can channel some of his love. And I'm kind of glad to say that Pastor, I need to warn you about me. I can see where this is heading. This is heading to a friendship. I need to warn you about me. And I said, what? And I hear all this. 911 calls, this, betrayals, a whole catalog of things. And then, my response, I'm sure, was, don't worry about it. We'll work it through. Now, again, that didn't mean they encountered Jesus in all his fullness in me, but I think that's a measure. That's something you can do. That relationship I'm thinking about in the long term is ongoing. And it has borne fruit in baptisms, it's borne fruit in weddings, it's borne fruit in things we've done together that impacted churches. Things, relationships that have developed from the one relationship to a whole constellation of other relationships. It's cool, I lost my microphone. My 12 minutes must be up. But we're about down to the end there. Is that really? There's so much fruit came from that relationship. Where the beginning statement was, you don't want to get involved with me. Oh, nonsense. Jesus wants to get involved with your problem, and my stuff, your needs, and your tragedy. And we should mirror that in our lives. And so if you have things going on in your life that you feel just that way about, you need to have him grasp it. So that's the sermon, part of the sermon. Now, the rest of the part of the sermon is what are we thankful for today? Thanksgiving is probably my favorite holiday for enjoyment and fun. Christmas is a little work for the pastor, but Thanksgiving, I kind of spear and I eat things and stuff. It's really great. So,